Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Paul Harris and I am president of the City Club's Board of Directors. I am very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Ron Richard, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Cleveland Foundation. As stated at its website, the Cleveland Foundation, quote, is the world's first community foundation and the nation's second largest today, with assets of $1.8 billion and annual grants of $80 to $85 million, end quote. The foundation was established on January 2nd, 1914, and at 2 years younger than the City Club of Cleveland, is also approaching its 100th year of vibrancy. Mr. Richard assumed the leadership position with the foundation in 2003 after an extensive period of service in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. He earned his bachelor's degree in history from Washington University in St. Louis and a master's degree in international relations from the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Early in his career, Mr. Richard served as a U.S. diplomat at the American Consulate General in Osaka, Kobe, Japan, and at the U.S. State Department. He served for 13 years at Matsushita Electric, today known as Panasonic, including as head of the company's North American research and development operations. Immediately prior to assuming the lead position for the Cleveland Foundation, Mr. Richard served as the managing director and chief operating officer of In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital fund, where he worked to ensure the prompt and effective delivery of In-Q-Tel source technologies into the U.S. intelligence community. In leading the Cleveland Foundation, Mr. Richard has stated that his personal goal is to help a great region, become even greater. He has contributed to the greater Cleveland community, not just in his role as president and chief executive officer of the foundation, but also through his service on the boards of several community organizations. He also serves on 2 corporate boards in the biotechnology and metal sectors, chairs the Ohio Grantmakers Forum Task Force on Educational Reform, and we'll hear his views on educational reform today, and in January 2009, was asked by the then governor of Ohio to fill the post of infrastructure czar to oversee the expenditure of federal stimulus funds in Ohio. Mr. Richard holds honorary doctorates from Baldwin Wallace College and Notre Dame College. His honors are many and include receipt of an African American Champion Award from the President's Council for his efforts in the area of inclusive economic development, an award from Wheaton College, the Otis Award for Social Justice, and a Champion of Sustainability Award from the Entrepreneurs for Sustainability. I am very pleased to present on behalf of the City Club of Cleveland, Ron Richard, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Cleveland Foundation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm deeply honored to have been invited to speak here today at this most venerable and intellectual establishment, the City Club of Cleveland. Because many of you listening today may not be that familiar with our foundation, I'd like to begin my remarks by providing a very brief overview of the Cleveland Foundation and our wide array of philanthropic endeavors. Then I'd like to share my views on what I believe is the most important issue facing our city and the nation in both the short and long term: education. I've chosen to focus on education today because it is a key factor affecting most of my organization's work and, moreover, all of this nation's critical problems and future opportunities. The Cleveland Foundation, established in 1914 by Frederick Harris Goff, the city's leading banker of that era, is one of the nation's largest foundations and the world's oldest community foundation. Community foundations, unlike national foundations, raise all of their funds from a local community and make all of their grants back into that local community. So all the wonderful Gates, Rockefeller, and Ford foundations can make grants all over the globe. Our foundation makes its grants in the greater Cleveland area. We have assets of $1.8 billion, and we make grants of about $80 million each year. The establishment of the Cleveland Foundation has had significance far beyond Cleveland because it represents the birth of the Community Foundation field. Today, there are over 1,000 community foundations across the globe. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for all Clevelanders now and in the future. We do much more than just write checks. We convene, lead, facilitate, and partner with key governmental, corporate, and nonprofit entities such as the city and county, our Chamber of Commerce, local banks and industrial companies, our eds and meds anchor institutions, including Case Western Reserve University, the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, Cleveland State University, and many, many others. We support the arts, economic development, social services, education at all levels, neighborhood revitalization, the promotion of an advanced energy industry here, and the globalization of Cleveland. During just the past several years, we've led the charge to establish Newbridge, a bright and shining new career after-school arts, a new center for after-school arts programs aimed at keeping at-risk youths in school, and for sophisticated adult training programs for low-income citizens. Working with our marvelous Cleveland Anchor Institution partners, we've begun to establish a series of for-profit, employee-owned cooperative companies for low-income residents of Cleveland. We call them Evergreen Cooperative Companies, and they include a green commercial laundry, a solar installation business, and coming soon, the largest urban greenhouse in the United States. We've also played a leading role in promoting advanced energy and creating the public-private partnership, which is working to construct a significant wind farm on Lake Erie. We hope this wind farm will help us to generate not just megawatts, but also a large number of R&D, manufacturing, and service jobs in this region. Last but not least, we make about 3,000 grants per year, both large and small, in response to requests from a wide range of community arts, social service, and educational organizations. We're proud of the impact which our foundation and its partners are having in the community. And we believe that in so many ways, Cleveland is moving in the right direction. However, over the course of the last 8 years, it has become increasingly clear to me that the issue at the root of almost all of our problems, and the factor that will most determine our city's and nation's ability to succeed in the future, is education. So it is worth spending the rest of our time today on this one topic. Allow me to begin, however, by sharing with you my personal biases so you'll know where I'm coming from and not misconstrue my comments. I come from a family of teachers. I think teaching is among the most noble and important professions on earth. And I ardently believe that effective educators should be revered by our society, as they are in other nations. In Japan, for example, where I lived for many years, the same honorific title, sensei, is used for both medical doctors and teachers. So a brain surgeon and a kindergarten teacher are addressed in the same highly respected manner, and their salaries don't vary to anywhere near the degree that they do in the United States. I also come from a pro-union family. In my opinion, there is no question that there was a time in our nation's history when unions helped to save American capitalism. Indeed, during the dark days when communism was in fashion, this economic system was never really a threat to the United States because our labor union movement had corrected most of the excesses of capitalism in other nations. Of course, there remains a need to respect and protect labor in order to maintain our all too critical middle class, which appears to be on the verge of becoming an endangered species. And I would like to remind the audience that the vast majority of our brave sons and daughters fighting for this nation in 2 overseas wars at present hail from our middle class. In my current job, I witness every day the problems that affect our city. how we're struggling to maintain our world-class arts organizations, how we're grappling with gang violence, teenage pregnancy, high crime, homelessness, unemployment in the face of thousands of job openings that can't be filled for lack of properly educated applicants. All issues stemming from or severely exacerbated by the state of our city's public education system over the course of the last 4 decades. Before honing in on Cleveland, let's just quickly review the state of K-12 public education nationwide and its impact on higher ed, society, and the economy. The bottom line is we are in peril, absolute peril as a nation. Our standard of living is at risk, our global leadership is at risk, and even this democracy itself is at risk because our education system is failing our children, especially in our major cities. And this will, if not fixed, ultimately lead to America's economic and social collapse. But this is not a newsflash. Way back in 1983, 27 years ago, the U.S. government's Bell Commission's landmark report, A Nation at Risk, famously stated, quote, "If an unfriendly power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war," unquote. Nearly 3 decades later, we've lost rather than gained ground. Whereas we used to be ranked number 1 in the world, America's educational performance now ranks no higher than the middle of the world's industrialized nations. Among industrialized nations, our 8th graders rank 17th in reading, 26th in math, and 20th in science. Scores which are as unacceptable as they are pitiful. 2 of every 3 new jobs today, and 90% of the jobs in the fastest growing high-tech fields require education beyond high school. And yet we can't even get nearly 1/3 of our kids through high school. Our national graduation rate is only 70%, and it's much lower in urban systems like Cleveland's, where barely half of the students graduate. Compare that to Denmark's 96% graduation rate, Japan's 93% graduation rate, and even in Poland, a developing economy, the high school graduation rate is 92%. Only 34% of our adults aged 18 to 34 enrolled in college. In South Korea, the rate is 53%. That country, which is only the size of Ohio, is churning out more college graduates in science, technology, engineering, and math than all 50 states combined. So what are the national ramifications of this poor, in absolute and relative terms, American educational performance? In short, the rest of the world is about to eat our economic lunch, breakfast and dinner. Forget the developed nations like Germany. Even the developing world is building new and better educational systems to try to catch up and surpass us, and they're having great success. From Scandinavia to Singapore to China, nations are setting very high standards for every student and teacher in every school. They're adapting their education systems to this century and the global marketplace. It's not just our economic health that's at risk. Our national security is too. Poor education systems are the main reason why 3/4, that's right, I said 75% of our nation's age-eligible young people cannot qualify to serve in this country's armed services. 1 of every 4 is ineligible because of a lack of a high school diploma. Among high school graduates who seek to enlist, about 30% get rejected because they can't meet the military's most basic reading and math requirements, which should tell us that our educational performance is even worse than what we think it is based on graduation rates alone. Richard Clarke, the anti-terrorism czar for the last Bush administration, recently published a book called Cyber War, in which he demonstrates how our adversaries are developing cyber attack technologies that could have a Pearl Harbor-like impact against our military and civilian infrastructure. Our power grid, communications, banking, transportation, and even military and intelligence systems are utterly vulnerable, in part because we've fallen behind in science, technology, and math. Finally, and most tragically of all, we're frittering away naturally talented human beings, the most precious capital of all. How can we as a country ever fulfill our potential or even just maintain our democracy and standard of living when so many of our citizens are unfulfilled and unable to engage in meaningful and interesting work? How can we maintain our moral compass as a nation in such circumstances? Our schools should be lifting our citizens out of persistent poverty and breaking down racial disparities in education and income and eliminating all of the stubborn vestiges of 2.5 centuries of legal slavery. But because many of our urban school systems are dysfunctional, the rich are getting richer and the poor, especially minorities, are getting poorer, and the middle class is shrinking fast. An economic state of affairs which has led to some very bad outcomes for a number of empires and nations over the course of world history. A University of California economist quantified the explosive growth in earnings disparities in a shocking study last year. In it, he demonstrated that from 1993 to 2007, the top 1% of Americans had come to possess half, 50%, of the nation's overall economic wealth. Now, I'm a corporate guy through and through and a true believer in private enterprise, but I find this fact to be alarming. Given these various dismal statistics, you may wonder why the debate over public education in America has been proceeding for decades with little improvement. We have known for quite some time that our current system of education is not working. It needs to be completely reinvented in our urban, rural, and even suburban districts. But why has it been so difficult to create change? First, unlike high-performing countries like Singapore and Finland, here in the United States, we neither have a national system of education nor a national teacher preparation program. There is no single point of control. Second, Americans have allowed themselves to be duped by the pernicious myth that low-income minority students cannot achieve academic success at very high levels. What President Bush once described as the soft bigotry of low expectations has crippled our ability to achieve true reform, particularly in our urban schools. Third, we have faced the tyranny of highly organized, entrenched interests. As Joel Klein reflected upon leaving his post as Chancellor of the New York City Public Schools, teachers' unions and other unions, bureaucrats, vendors, and politicians who have benefited from our deeply fractured system continue to aggressively resist change, while the opposition, parents, companies which need skilled workers, and concerned citizens have been, up until now, completely unorganized. Fourth, the public has developed a deep level of mistrust in the current system due to a long track record of broken promises and marginal progress. And many parents and students have abandoned the community altogether, fleeing to the suburbs in hopes of better educational opportunities, a phenomenon which has helped to hollow out our once thriving urban cores. And finally, the media, meaning television, radio, movies, and video games, has poisoned our citizens, especially our children, with anti-intellectual and anti-education messages that predispose them to undervalue education and learning and to disrespect the very people, teachers, who can provide them with the tools they need for a lifetime of success. Hollywood may think that it's liberal, progressive, and caring because a few movie stars go to Africa to help with AIDS or to New Orleans in the wake of Katrina to raise funds. But the damage which Hollywood has done to our nation by inuring our kids to violence, sexual misconduct, and racist and misogynistic attitudes is incalculable. Yes, you folks in the media bear responsibility as well for the nation's educational performance. However, there are national signs of hope. The growing movement for change and political will around education reform is arguably at its strongest moment in recent history. The past decade has brought with it courageous leaders, new laws, innovative ideas, and a much deeper understanding of the problem. So what are these signs of hope? The following are the 5 brightest beacons of hope from what we can see. First, the federal government under Presidents George W. Bush and now Barack Obama has begun to play a significant role. The White House and the U.S. Department of Education has framed education as a national problem that could cripple our entire country. Education reformers aren't alone anymore. Second, the discussion around a national curriculum is moving forward. Ohio, in addition to 40 other states in the District of Columbia, have come together to create common academic standards and assessments to measure student progress. Third, whether or not accountability measures should be in place, both in and out of the classroom, is no longer a subject for debate. There is consensus that superintendents, principals, and teachers must be held accountable. This marks significant progress. The real question now is how accountability should be measured. Fourth, competition has finally gotten its foot in the public education door. Entrepreneurs are creating models that work outside the typical educational space. Teach for America, for example, is attracting the best and brightest to the field of education. New charter schools like KIPP and Green Dot have had unprecedented success with low-income students. And let us not forget philanthropic giants like Bill and Melinda Gates and Eli Broad, who are not only contributing in a big way financially, but are willing to take big risks for innovation. And fifth, at the local level, we see a group of men and women who are excited to lead and help turn around some of the worst performing districts in our country. Although they have distinctly different styles, they've all managed to achieve some level of progress while becoming household names. Joel Klein, former Chancellor of New York City Schools, Michelle Rhee, former Chancellor of District of Columbia Schools, and Arne Duncan, U.S. Secretary of Education. So what is the current state of public education in Cleveland? And what roles have the Cleveland Foundation and its key allies, the George Gunn Foundation and the Greater Cleveland Partnership, our Chamber of Commerce, and numerous other local organizations been playing in this key sphere of public life? Like all urban school districts in the United States, the current performance level of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, or CMSD, can best be described as abysmal. Last year, 70% of our schools were rated an academic watch or emergency, the equivalent of a D or F grade. Of every 100 Cleveland ninth graders, 54 will graduate from high school in 4 years, 25 will go on to college for a short period of time, and only 7 will graduate from college with a bachelor's degree. Stated another way to drive home my point, 93% of our kids will not go on to earn a college degree. Over the past 10 years, CMSD has lost 31,493 students, a 40% decline in enrollment. They have voted with their feet. At the same time, CMSD's costs have risen primarily due to agreed-upon increases in salaries and benefits. 5 years ago, the Cleveland and George Gunn Foundations partnered with the school district, the teachers union, and other community partners to begin to ameliorate the situation. Our goal was to create new innovative schools that operated differently than typical urban public schools and got much better results. Given the unwarranted low expectations for our city's school children, we decided we needed to achieve proof of concept that if you provided these kids with a great educational experience, they could achieve at a high level and go on to college. We wanted to work with the district and others to create pockets of excellence and then take this excellence to scale across the entire system. To date, we have directly invested in the development of 11 innovative schools that offer a broad range of choices for children and their families, including single-sex pre-K to 8 academies, high schools that focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and a K-12 international baccalaureate school. These schools are supported by a designated office within CMSD, the Office of New Schools and Innovation, and operate under separate memorandums of understanding with the teachers union that provide greater autonomy at the building level, including control over hiring. While these schools are not yet where they need to be, most are on the path to excellence. As a cohort, these schools are outperforming other district schools on almost every measure. All have been rated in continuous improvement or above. These schools are drawing in new students, helping to retain current students, and attracting new teachers and talent. These schools are places where parents are welcome and teachers can collaborate, problem solve, and focus on the needs of their students. All of the schools we have helped to, of all of the schools we've helped to create, the one that is dearest to my own heart is the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine. I serve as chairman of the board of this school, which prepares students for college and careers in medicine and healthcare. Through its unique partnership with Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, the Cleveland Clinic, and university hospitals, the school exposes its students to a rigorous, state-of-the-art science curriculum. When the Cleveland Foundation and its anchor institution partners helped create this new public school 4 years ago, we had a hard time finding enough students. We had no test to get in. Most of the students told us they had chosen this school because they thought they would be physically safer there than at their neighborhood high school. They were not saying, "I want to be a doctor." We had 100 slots and could only recruit 78 kids. But after just 4 years, the School of Science and Medicine has earned the state's Department of Education's highest possible rating of excellent. Its test scores put us on par with the best high schools in our suburbs. It ranks among the top 6% of all schools that U.S. News and World Report analyzed in its America's Best High Schools report. Last June, the school graduated its first class of seniors. 100% of the kids graduated, virtually all poor minority kids, and all of them are going to a 4-year college, almost all with full scholarships for all 4 years. They were accepted at some schools that you might have heard of: MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Bowdoin, Case Western Reserve, The Ohio State University. Do not tell me poor kids can't learn. I think it is fair to say that these opportunity schools, along with several high-performing local charter schools, such as E-Prep, Citizens Academy, and the Intergenerational School, as well as a handful of other high-performing district schools, have proved the concept that if you put low-income urban kids in a school with a great principal, rich community partners, excellent and committed teachers, more flexibility in terms of class time, and a rigorous and exciting curriculum, anything is possible and even probable. Through this work, I've come to realize that we have a deeply committed mayor and one of the nation's greatest and most courageous school superintendents in CMSD CEO, Dr. Eugene Sanders. And we are also blessed with many other superb and very, very hardworking teachers, principals, union officials, and central office staff. But as I mentioned earlier, our intention was to create and then work with the district to bring these highly successful educational innovations to scale across the entire district so that the other 90% of our kids could also receive a high-quality education and go on to a life of success. You might ask, how's that going? Well, frankly speaking, despite important gains, not as well as we'd hoped. On the plus side, the district's transformation plan, adopted earlier this year, has set challenging and critical 5-year goals, including raising the high school graduation rate from 54% to 90%, and ensuring that 100% of district schools receive a rating of continuous improvement or above, with half of those in the effective or excellent category. I also believe that the plan lays out a rational strategy for getting us from where we currently stand to where we need to be. And I want to congratulate our superintendent for achieving continuous improvement this year for our school system. The district is moving forward with key aspects of the plan. Central office is being reorganized from top to bottom. The district is putting in place a performance management system designed to hold everyone in the system accountable for results. The district has put in place a school-by-school improvement plan, giving more support and oversight to the lowest performing schools. Despite unfounded warnings of impending chaos and violence, the district very successfully closed 16 of the chronically worst performing schools. Finally, the district has moved forward with growing its portfolio of innovative schools. It opened 3 new schools this year and just issued an RFP inviting charter schools to partner with the district. CMSD is the first Ohio district to adopt this approach, a strategy that has been used successfully by districts in New York, Denver, and elsewhere. On the minus side, there are several developments that have threatened both the scope and pace of transformation, and I'd like to briefly touch on 3 of the most troubling. First, the transformation plan called for the radical restructuring of 22 persistently low-performing schools, which included a new academic program, a new principal, and replacement of at least 50% of the teachers. The teachers' union objected to this course of action, saying that the CEO did not have the right under the current contract to reassign staff. The union won. Consequently, only 8 of the original schools are being significantly overhauled. What a tragedy. What a travesty. Second, earlier this year, the district and teachers union signed a 3-year contract. While some real salary and benefit concessions were made, the contract does not fundamentally tackle many critical barriers to change, such as tenure and seniority, inflexible work rules and assignments, and pay based on longevity and credentials rather than performance. Finally, as is often the case with large, unsuccessful systems, pockets of success are resented rather than revered. I'm just going to tell it like it is when I say that there is a growing and pernicious tendency to try and discredit the success of the innovative schools in Cleveland. So instead of becoming the shining example of transformational success, Cleveland remains an example of how hard it can be, even with a highly supportive mayor and a world-class superintendent, to put the interests of our children first and achieve fundamental change. We've made progress both nationally and here in Cleveland, but it hasn't been nearly enough. And the fact remains that we're still in peril. Looking forward, what should we be doing in Cleveland over the next 2 to 3 years to ensure success? First, we must advocate for needed changes in state law and policy, such as abolishing seniority-based layoffs and lockstep pay systems, and creating alternative teacher certification that would open up Ohio to teach for America. In addition, we need to support Ohio's collaboration with other states aimed at strengthening academic standards and assessments. Second, we must accelerate the development of new schools and new school designs that challenge outdated ways of delivering education. We need project-based learning, not boring lectures. We must figure out ways to expand the reach of our most effective teachers. We can and we must take better advantage of new technologies. Third, we need to restructure CMSD's Human Resource Department, moving from an almost exclusive focus on compliance to one that focuses on talent recruitment and development. All managers must celebrate and support excellence while at the same time be able to terminate more easily and more cheaply poor and mediocre staff. Fourth, we must craft a radically different union contract with the teachers as well as with other unions. We need to eliminate seniority and tenure not just in state law, but from the contract, and move to performance-based pay systems. Work rules need to maximize flexibility in schools. I believe that the best teachers in the system support this. And finally, we will need to do more with less. Our district faces a minimum $54 million deficit in the coming year, and over a $100 million deficit in the following year. This doesn't take into consideration at all the state cuts that we expect are coming. A balanced budget will require significant cuts as well as new revenue, most likely in the form of a levy, which I believe voters will support if, but only if, they see radical changes in the system. In balancing the budget, we must make the necessary changes in cost structures. This will not be easy, but it's essential. I'd like to conclude today by saying that this great nation, which I believe remains, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, the last best hope of earth, cannot endure unless we fix our educational system, because it is the key to our future economic prosperity, national security, cohesiveness, and moral authority in the world. This will require great change, and change is not easy. It involves conflict and compromise. It requires sacrifice. It creates winners and losers. But we will all be victorious if we preserve our nation, our society, and our American culture. It will take all of us, superintendents, principals, teachers, parents, students, elected officials, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, and the media, to ensure that our education system opens the doors for all of our children. And if the task seems too daunting, just remember that our nation triumphed over the Great Depression, fascism, and communism, and we can meet this challenge as well. The bugle has been sounding. It is now time, actually way past time, to heed its call. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday Forum featuring Ron Richard, President and Chief Executive Officer for the Cleveland Foundation. We'll return to him in a moment for our traditional City Club questions, a very important part of the City Club's rich tradition. Please formulate your questions now, and please keep them brief. Members and guests alike are welcome to attend City Club forums, and we hope that everyone listening will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. Please visit our website, that's cityclub.org, to see a full schedule of our upcoming programs. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Our television broadcast partner is WVIZ PBS IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Today is the Norman A. Sugarman Memorial Forum on Philanthropy in America, made possible by a generous gift from the Norman A. Sugarman Fund at the Council of Jewish Federations. Joining us at the head table today are Paul Feinberg and Jonathan Green, representing the fund. Will you both please stand and be recognized? Thank you for your support. We are pleased to welcome guests at tables hosted today by Baker and Hostetler, Case Western Reserve University, the Cleveland Foundation, Cuyahoga County Public Library, Friends of Joe Simperman, our Strategy Group, and the Sisters of Charity Health System. Thank you all for joining us today. We are also very pleased to host students at our forum today who are here as part of our City Club student program. Participation of these students is made possible by a generous grant from the Fred E. Scholl Foundation, Bernard L. Carr, Chairman. With us today are students from BW Scholars Program and Horizon Science Academy. Will the students please stand and be recognized? Now our questions. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Development Director Cheryl Heldon and City Club Program Director Carrie Miller. First question, please.
Mr. Richmond, good afternoon. My name is Julio Torres. I would first like to thank the City Club of Cleveland for inviting us today. I'm here with part of our speech and debate club from Horizon Science Academy. We enjoyed your speech very much today, and I would like to ask you if you would come visit our school and possibly take a tour.
That's the softball question for today. I'd be delighted and honored. Be very happy to do that, and very soon.
Mr. Richard, listening to your talk, I'm struck with the level of responsibility you place on teachers and on the teaching system. I did not hear a word about the responsibility of parents. How do you inspire parents in your schools that are being successful, and how do you extend that throughout the city?
Thanks. Well, excuse me, but I think I did mention parents at least 3 times in the speech. I was very careful in crafting the speech to make absolutely certain that I didn't leave the impression with anyone that the onus is put solely on teachers. Obviously, students come to school with a set of attitudes. Students come to school hopefully with some learning that they've received by parents reading to them. Hopefully, students throughout their whole school career will have parents in their corner helping to guide them. But I do think that we have to face the sad reality that because of the phenomenon that's been called babies having babies, that there are a lot of students who don't have those supportive parents. And society has a kind of in loco parentis obligation to serve these kids particularly well. If they're not going to be saved by parental control, teachers in schools are the last line of defense for these kids. And at the High School of Science and Medicine, I can tell you many of these wonderful kids don't have 2 parents. Many of them live with a grandparent. Many of them are very low-income folks. We've, taken up collections for shoes and winter coats for these kids, and 100% of them got into great colleges. So I'm certainly not taking the onus off of parents. People have to, I think, take a great responsibility. And I think also that it's time, well past time, for society to stop looking the other way about the very large number of births in this county alone. I think the statistics very high, something like 87% of the births in the city were to unwed teenage mothers. You can't have those kind of statistics and expect that it's going to be easy for the teachers. I deeply respect the challenges facing teachers, but it can't be an excuse for poor performance.
Ken Taylor. That's terrible. Shall I just use, there we go. Mr. Richard, my name is Ken Taylor. I own a company called Ohio Cat. I employ close to 500 service technicians, and I certainly concur with the goal of increasing the graduation rates in high school and in college. What about the sector of society that's the trades? What about education in the trades so that we have the bricklayers, the technicians, the welders, the people that actually build things for their success and growing that group of employees?
Yes. I didn't have time to touch on that in the speech, but I do think that every school district in the country should have great vocational programs. I did mention Newbridge. It has a vocational program for folks who did drop out of school but want to have a wonderful career in an important trade. So we've started looking at training people to draw blood in our hospitals and other hospital-related type jobs. We're looking at things like welding. There's a huge shortage of welders in this country. I think 40,000 according to the Pentagon. And so that's a good point, and I appreciate your bringing that up. It's very important.
Mr. Richard, I love this country very deeply, and I've seen how great it could have been during World War II with all of our innovation and so forth. Colleges have, the inflation in colleges has been exponential. I believe in the 40s it was $250, later in the 40s $750 for the best college. Well, my question is, how do we solve that, make it affordable for all? And secondly, I cannot help but mention, you mentioned the George Gunn Foundation. Now, I'm sure it does a lot of good, but I'm an artist. When I was in the Cleveland School of Art, he was president and owner. And as far as I'm concerned, he is public enemy number one.
Well, let me answer the last part of that question first, because it sort of made me forget the first part of the question. The Cleveland Foundation works with the George Gunn Foundation every day of the week in every area that we work in. I'm very proud to work with the Gunn Foundation, and as I go around this town, and see the Gunn name on so many lovely and important artistic, cultural, and educational institutions, I thank God for George Gunn and the Foundation. Next.
Hi, Mr. Richards. Thank you. Two things I'd like to mention in terms of what we as a community could do. One is that those of us who have time can go to these schools through the proper channels to do volunteer work, teaching. These kids need more than just what they can get in the classroom sometimes. And volunteers in reading and math and science and any other subject that you have the skills to contribute would be, I think, highly valued for these kids. The other is that many of these children do not have the wherewithal to find an afternoon job. If they are not going to be at school after school, they could use a job, an income. They often do not have shoes and socks and clothing, and they help support their parents and their grandparents and their siblings. So if you have, so I guess I have to make it as a question. If you have a job If you have a job as an afternoon school position, after school position that you can offer to these children, could you please let someone in the community know that this is available? Thank you.
Thanks. And to make it easier for you, the Cleveland Foundation started something called the MyCom project with many, many partners all across town. And we've provided 3,000 summer jobs for at-risk youth and jobs not just in summer but during the year. So if you'd like to contribute to that, just give the foundation a call and we can get your check into the MyCom budget and provide more jobs.
Ron, you certainly gave a very clear analysis of the challenges that face the school systems both locally and nationally. Could you give some emphasis or some thought as to the possibility of expanding the magnet schools, which we have a few in Cleveland, and what about the funding for it? We think that will be available with the new budget cuts that are coming?
Thank you, Stanley. Well, when I was in the business world, the first thing I learned that the quickest way to success is to expand your operations that are working well. So I do think the low-hanging fruit for us is to increase enrollment in all the schools that are performing very, very well. And, and from a budgetary standpoint, I think that would be very effective, very efficient. And so I do think that that's where we should focus.
If you support that, America should have a school structure. It's still viable.
Yes. No, I think that we should have kids get 3 months off every summer so they can help Ma and Pa bring in the harvest. As they did in 1840, which is still the school paradigm for Cleveland and every other school district. I think that if we want to be competitive in the future, and by the way, I talk to a whole lot of kids in this town. There's not a lot for them to do in the summer. If you can make education exciting, there's nowhere they'd rather be in the summer than learning. And that's where this nation needs to go, and we have to figure out a way to fund it.
Hi, Mr. Richard. My name is Ulysses Stokes. I'm a team leader for City here at Thomas Jefferson 9th Grade Academy. And my question is, you mentioned a lot of problems, how important teaching is. How, besides Teach for America, bringing that here, and what other ways can Cleveland Metropolitan School District do to recruit talented, young, highly qualified teachers to the district?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to broaden the question nationally. Anyone can say anything, but usually, if you see if people are putting their money where their mouth is, you can tell how sincere they are. As a nation, I truly think we're not going to get the best and the brightest. I have to step back and give you a little history, which I think we all know. For many, many, many decades, this country had a wonderful school system in part because of discrimination. When women couldn't do anything except be nurses and teachers, we had a huge percentage of the population, like 50%, that were working for, much less than they should have been able to earn just because they couldn't get into other fields. In the 1960s, with the women's liberation movement, now women were able to become doctors, lawyers, accountants, whatever they wanted to be, and the free ride was over. But society has never realized that that was the case and adjusted. We have never elevated the pay of teachers. We have never elevated the profession. We think nothing of someone coming out of a bachelor's degree in mathematics and going to Wall Street to be a program trader and making millions of dollars within their first couple of years in bonuses, while a teacher in some of the most difficult urban districts starts out at a very piddly salary. So I think that the nation really needs to look at this. My personal view is we should have a sort of GI Bill for teachers. My personal view is if you go into teaching, we should have some loan forgiveness for student loans, or we should have a differential tax rate. That's the way you're going to get the best and brightest in our society to go into teaching, not just because of the money. Because there are tons of people who work for peanuts as teachers because they know how important it is. It's the way to send the message to our society that we think that a teacher is as important as a rapper, as a investment banker, as a program trader, as a lawyer that's suing companies over asbestos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's time to think out of the box on that subject.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to Ron Richard, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Cleveland Foundation. Thank you, Mr. Richard. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.